Hello all you freedom-loving people. A new era of possible denuclearization has emerged with the deal between Russia and the U.S. ending yesterday. Talks between Iran and the U.S. ended with more sanctions and the U.S. forces demonstrating their readiness. Okay, let's get into it. Today, Attorney General Pam Bondi announced that they apprehended a key suspect in the September 11, 2012 attack on U.S. diplomatic outposts in Benghazi, Libya. 4 Americans were killed in the 2012 Benghazi attack, including a U.S. ambassador, a State Department employee, and 2 CIA contractors. The attack targeted a U.S. diplomatic compound and a nearby CIA annex.
We have never forgotten those heroes. And we have never stopped seeking justice for that crime against our nation. In fact, from day one, Cash and Dan would sit in meetings and say, we're going to get them. And they did. Today, I'm proud to announce that the FBI has arrested one of the key participants behind the Benghazi attack. Zubair al-Bakhash landed at Andrews Air Force Base at 3 a.m. this morning. He is in our custody. He was greeted by Director Patel and U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro. Al-Bakhash will now face American justice on American soil. We will prosecute this alleged terrorist to the fullest extent of the law.
U.S. Attorney Jeanine Pirro said that Bakhash faces an 8-count indictment, including murder, attempted murder, terrorism-related charges, and arson. Bakhash is now the 3rd person charged in connection with the 2012 Benghazi attack. Yesterday, the Nuclear Arms Control Treaty between the United States and Russia expired. President Trump stated that he would not extend the treaty, but would instead seek to negotiate a new nuclear agreement. The new Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty, known as New START, was signed in 2010 by then U.S. President Barack Obama and Russian President Dmitry Medvedev. It aimed to limit the deployment of deployable nuclear weapon systems by both parties, and it set restrictions on the number of deployable nuclear warheads. However, the Chinese Communist Party did not accede to this treaty. The initial validity period of this treaty was 10 years. On February 3, 2021, the United States and Russia exchanged diplomatic notes to extend its validity until February 5, 2026. Undoubtedly constrained by the treaty, the United States was unable to quickly improve its strategic weapons capabilities. It could only watch helplessly as the Chinese Communist Party secretly developed its own. However, President Trump had already indicated that when this agreement expires, he would secure a more favorable deal involving China. This idea is not a recent development. He had already been considering it during his first term in office, as early as mid-December 2019, during talks between U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov. Both sides expressed a desire to improve relations. When discussing the treaty, Lavrov indicated that Russia agreed with the U.S. proposal to involve the Chinese Communist Party in arms control negotiations. Lavrov stated that should the Chinese Communist Party be willing to negotiate, they would discuss a multilateral nuclear disarmament proposal. Pompeo, however, asserted that numerous weapons systems contribute to strategic instability. Hence, it's imperative not only to engage the Chinese Communist Party in arms control dialogue, but also it's imperative to incorporate into the New START treaty all means of power within its possession that could provoke strategic instability. However, the Chinese Communist Party has refused to participate in arms control negotiations. Against the backdrop of the Trump administration's having long regarded the Chinese Communist Party as its foremost adversary, the United States sees no need to shackle itself unnecessarily in the face of the CCP's unchecked expansion beyond treaty constraints. This constitutes the fundamental reason for America's refusal to extend the New START treaty. In his Thursday post on True Social, President Trump called New START a badly negotiated deal that he said is being grossly violated. Rather than extend New START, we should have our nuclear experts work on a new, improved, and modernized treaty that can last long into the future. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated on Wednesday that any new arms control agreement should include China, given the scale and rapid expansion of the Chinese Communist Party's nuclear arsenal. Reuters reported that the Chinese Communist Party is currently estimated to possess around 600 nuclear warheads, but the Pentagon projects that by 2030, the CCP will have over 1,000 nuclear warheads. President Trump stated that he wished to advance denuclearization in collaboration with Russia and China. However, Beijing asserted that it would be unreasonable to expect it to engage in disarmament negotiations with two nations possessing nuclear arsenals vastly exceeding its own. CCP Foreign Ministry spokesperson Lin Jian made it clear on Thursday that China would not participate in any trilateral arrangements. Lin said, China's nuclear forces are not on the same level as those of the United States and Russia, and China will not participate in disarmament negotiations at this stage. One reason the Chinese Communist Party has consistently refused to participate in arms control negotiations is to avoid revealing precise details about its strategic weapons inventory to the United States and Russia, thereby maintaining a psychological game of feints and bluffs with America. Some United States military generals and observers of the CCP military have claimed that fraudulent language cannot be ruled out in publications about CCP missiles. They have pointed out that fraud is a common tactic of the Chinese military. The White House confirmed yesterday that the Trump administration is pulling a total of $1.5 billion in federal funding for healthcare and transportation projects from a number of Democratic states, citing waste and mismanagement and the promotion of woke campaigns in those states. A spokesperson for the White House Office of Management and Budget said that the states were being targeted for waste and mismanagement of taxpayer funds. The Department of Transportation is to remove $943 million in funding for Colorado, Illinois, California, and Minnesota. And the CDC was ordered to nix at least $602 million meant for these states. Reportedly, the transportation funds that were withdrawn were mainly used for the construction of charging stations for electric vehicles and also for other environmental projects such as green buses. The healthcare money funded research on diversity and equity and inclusion initiatives, or transgender medicine, that was not in line with the administration policy, according to White House officials. This is not the first time the White House has pulled funding for blue states. Previously, the White House has attempted to pull more than $10 billion in child care benefit funding to California, Colorado, New York, Illinois, and Minnesota, as well as nearly $8 billion in Department of Energy funding for green projects in key blue states. Democrats in several of the affected blue states have voiced opposition to the new White House measure. Eric Maruyama, spokesperson for the Colorado Democratic Governor Jared Polis, responded by saying that the state had not yet received formal notice of the defunding and that it would fight back. Investigative journalist Julie K. Brown was the leading voice in bringing the dark side of the Epstein scandal back to light. After 8 months of meticulous and painstaking work, she was able to find information on about 60 possible surviving victims of Jeffrey Epstein. But were these women still willing to talk about those traumatic experiences after they were raped and victimized in their teens when they were in their prime, and then suffered secondary abuse by the justice system and intimidating harassment by Epstein's legal team for years? But Brown didn't barge into their lives as a high-flying journalist. She consulted with psychotherapists and she scrutinized how to communicate with trauma survivors. She wrote letters to communicate with these women. She didn't write these to punish Epstein. She did it to allow the victims of all sexual assaults to find dignity. Then finally, the first victim spoke up. She was tricked into giving a massage by her boyfriend's cousin, only to find out that it was a trap. She was lured into Epstein's mansion and sexually assaulted by him. The second victim is now dead from a drug overdose, but fortunately she was interviewed by a Daily Mail reporter and the record was preserved. In the years following her contact with Epstein, she anesthetized herself with alcohol and drugs and eventually died in a cheap motel. The third victim was coaxed in the name of a massage for the elderly. After being sexually assaulted, her greatest pain was not only for herself, but also because she could not face her family. She first locked herself in her room. Then she began to loiter, take drugs, and then she was on the verge of committing suicide. A total of 8 victims bravely came forward to tell their heartbreaking details. Epstein not only threatened and enticed, but he also forced the victimized girls to recruit more classmates and friends. Such tactics created a great sense of guilt in the victims, who still believe that they were also accomplices. As the investigation progressed, Julie K. Brown faced pressure from all sides. First up was a team of top-notch lawyers who were hired by Epstein with sophisticated tactics. They threatened the victims and their families, and they asked the judge to prohibit the media from accessing material that may reveal the privacy of the victims, and to shut down the possibility of an investigation. There was also skepticism and even hostility from within the media industry. Brown's private life began to be seriously disrupted. Then, in November 2018, Julie K. Brown's investigative series, Power and Lies, was published. The impact of this story was explosive. Not only did it generate a tsunami of attention on social media, it directly contributed to the judicial process. In February of 2019, the U.S. Department of Justice opened an investigation into Epstein's indictment. And in July 2019, the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of New York rearrested and indicted Epstein on charges of a sex trafficking conspiracy involving a minor. And this time, he didn't get away with it, or did he? The United States began mediated negotiations in Oman today with the Islamic Republic of Iran. According to the footage that was published by the Foreign Minister of Oman, the two sides did not meet directly. Instead, the Omani diplomats held separate back-to-back talks with them as mediators. But after the 2 rounds of talks, Axios reported that during the talks today, Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner met directly with the foreign minister of the Islamic Republic of Iran. And an Iranian regime media did confirm a face-to-face exchange between them took place, but they described it as limited to just a greeting. Axios also reported that another round of talks will take place in the coming days, and the Wall Street Journal said that both sides have signaled a willingness to keep working toward a diplomatic solution that could prevent a strike by the United States. But the Wall Street Journal further reported that the Iranian regime stuck to its refusal in talks today to end enrichment of nuclear fuel. According to the Wall Street Journal, the foreign minister of the Iranian regime told his U.S. counterpart that they would not agree to end enrichment or move it offshore, and he rejected a core U.S. requirement. So neither the United States nor Iran have moved much from their initial position. In an interview with the state media of the Iranian regime, Arachi said that the talks today were a good start. He also said that decisions on how the talks move forward will be made in each country's capital. He also said that both sides agreed to continue negotiations and that progress toward a shared framework is possible if talks stay on this track. Then, the U.S. Treasury Department announced new sanctions on the Iranian regime today. The new sanctions target 2 individuals, 5 companies, and 14 vessels that are tied to the energy and shipping network of the Iranian regime. The sanctions freeze assets and they ban dealings with U.S. persons. Those who are targeted are spread across several countries, including Turkey, the United Arab Emirates, China, India, and the Marshall Islands. The sanctions also include shipping firms, traders, and tankers that are accused of helping the Iranian regime in exporting oil and related products. The Treasury sanctions today came as Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent said yesterday that they have seen the Iranian regime wiring money out of the country like crazy.
Our fencing, we have seen the Iranian leadership wiring money out of the country like crazy. So the rats are leaving the ship, and that is a good sign that they know the end may be near.
In a recent interview, Vice President J.D. Vance voiced his concerns regarding the Iranian regime.
By the way, Megan, one thing I would say about the Iranians that is just really weird to me, and I don't understand their system, and I frankly think that it makes diplomacy with them extraordinarily difficult, is the person who makes the decisions in Iran is the supreme leader. Okay, the president, our sense is, doesn't have a lot of juice, doesn't really matter. The foreign minister seems to talk to the supreme leader, and that's mainly the person that we've communicated with. But it's a very weird country to conduct diplomacy with when you can't even talk to the person who's in charge of the country. That makes all of this much more complicated, and it makes the whole situation much more absurd. Like, he can pick up the phone and call Putin. He can pick up the phone and call Xi. Even countries that we have very hostile relations with, he can pick up the phone. North Korea. He met the guy at the 38th parallel. It is bizarre that we can't just talk to the actual leadership of a country. It makes diplomacy very, very difficult.
But it's still unclear what really happened during today's talks or what comes next. The United Arab Emirates-based newspaper, The National, reported yesterday that despite the scheduled talks, the Trump administration is working on a transition project away from the Islamic Republic. The report said that Jared Kushner is playing an active role in this effort. The report also said that Kushner is helping to form a group of Iranian-American business leaders and entrepreneurs to advise on creating a kind of temporary transitional body that could help govern the country in the event of the Iranian regime's collapse. The National, which is considered close to the United Arab Emirates government, reported that the Trump administration is seeking to hold a meeting with Iranian opposition figures in Palm Beach, Florida. The meeting could take place as soon as this weekend, but it's not clear yet whether it will happen at Mar-a-Lago. The report also noted the role of the Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi in efforts to change the Iranian regime, and it pointed to his broad support and the chants of his name that were heard in the streets during the recent protests in Iran. And Pahlavi was recently invited to attend the Munich Security Conference, which is one of the biggest security events in the world. The event invited him to replace the Iranian foreign minister due to the brutal attacks by the Iranian regime on the people of Iran. And today, after the talks, the U.S. Central Command announced that the USS Abraham Lincoln Carrier Strike Group conducted patrols in the Arabian Sea. According to CENTCOM, the operation took place while aircraft from the carrier Air Wing 9 were flying over the strike group, demonstrating the operational readiness of U.S. forces. Precious metals and digital gold have had a worrisome run as of late. After plunging 20% yesterday, silver prices continue to fall in early trading on Friday morning to a low of $64 per ounce. Gold prices also fell for the second day in a row. Bitcoin, known as digital gold, is even worse. After falling below the $70,000 mark yesterday, the decline has been unstoppable. James Butterfield, the head of research at CoinShares, said that $70,000 was an important psychological barrier that, if not maintained, was quite likely to fall to the $60,000 to $65,000 range. However, he was still being too cautious. He had underestimated how severe the fall would be. After breaking through the $70,000 barrier at 11 a.m. London time, it dropped by a further $10,000 in less than 12 hours, from 11 a.m. to 12 p.m. London time. The cryptocurrency market is scarier than the stock market. This is because it's open 24 hours a day and there's no circuit breaker. Once a sell-off occurs, it's very difficult to stop. While Bitcoin briefly rose today, the shock from this crash is far from over. Investors are reassessing the real utility of this token. Seeing this, you might say, I don't invest in Bitcoin. This news has nothing to do with me. But wait a minute, stay tuned. This Bitcoin drop has implications beyond the cryptocurrency world. It could have something to do with everyone. Some people might say that there's no need to be nervous. This is just Bitcoin's cycle. Going through the history of Bitcoin, it seems to be true that such a cycle exists. We know that Bitcoin was officially launched in January of 2009 on the internet. It became a currency to buy goods in 2010. A year later, WikiLeaks announced that it was accepting Bitcoin donations, and after that, Bitcoin started to gradually come into the public eye. Its price has also risen year after year, surpassing $1,000 for the first time in 2014. With that, Bitcoin plummeted in 2015. It took 1,067 days from the bottom to December 7th, 2017, when Bitcoin surged past $15,000. The second bear market low was in 2018. The downtrend started in June 2018, and by December, Bitcoin was down more than 80% from its all-time high. This was followed by a 1,059-day upswing. By November 9th, 2021, Bitcoin reached an all-time high of $68,300. Then, on October 4th, 2022, Bitcoin fell back to $19,800. It took 1,010 days to climb from the bottom to a new record of $126,000. Therefore, Bitcoin supporters have concluded that there's an iron law. If you can survive the trough for about 1,060 days, about 3 years, the next bull market will rebound violently. That's why they think that there's no need to make a fuss about this drop. Of course, if this theory really holds true, then Bitcoin is going to continue to fall this time. But there's another voice. This time is different, because several factors have changed. Kevin Warsh's appointment changed the previous plan of everyone to sell the dollar and therefore affected the financial markets. This part we analyzed already. Today we're going to talk about a few other issues that people are ignoring. For starters, Bitcoin's investor demographic isn't what it used to be. John Todaro, an analyst at Needham, pointed out the harsh reality that retail investor interest in Bitcoin is extremely low. When Bitcoin was at its lowest point in 2022, the most common advice was to buy while the price was low. But this time, the internet is silent, and there are few people making similar noise. This is because during these turbulent years, retail investors have lost almost all their money. They have no money left to invest. The market in 2024 and 2025 had become more and more professional and institutionalized. The price of Bitcoin is so high right now that it's hard to get new retail investors in. So the market today is a battle between a few institutions. It's important to understand that institutions don't have emotions. They're not invested in Bitcoin because they believe in it. They're investing in Bitcoin as a speculative product. And when it gets too risky, they don't hesitate to sell. And of course, the new accounting bill has an impact on all of this. They have no other choice but to liquidate their positions when the price of digital coins plummets. One more reason for the decline in institutional interest in Bitcoin is the fallout from regulatory expectations. President Trump campaigned on giving cryptocurrencies the best regulatory environment. People were excited and were talking about Bitcoin hitting $150,000 or higher when President Trump moved into the White House. But now the Senate seems to be more anxious about solving America's housing problem. That leaves investment institutions believing that Bitcoin's big rally is going to be a while in coming. As we said, institutions are treating digital coins as speculative assets, and they have no interest in holding them if they don't see the effect in the short term. It's a double-edged sword. For a legal and transparent perspective, regulation is absolutely necessary. However, the main users of digital currency are often drug dealers, money launderers, or corrupt Chinese Communist Party officials. So would they welcome regulation? As soon as the prospect of regulation emerges, they will start preparing to retreat. Without these users, Bitcoin really doesn't have much use in the real world, at least for the time being, since its use as a currency is very limited. And some people have linked the currency plunge in Bitcoin to President Trump's crackdown on drug dealers. President Trump's iron-fisted crackdown on drug trafficking organizations inside and outside of the United States has taken the steam out of the industry and dragged down Bitcoin as a result. And then there's the fact that the macro logic behind Bitcoin just doesn't hold up anymore. Let's take an example. If you've read Bitcoin's white paper or listened to Bitcoin proponents preach, you've heard it before. Bitcoin is the gold of chaos. When war breaks out, banks close, and fiat currencies are devalued, only a decentralized asset like Bitcoin, which doesn't require anyone's endorsement, can preserve your wealth. Here comes the reality test. The weekend of January 31st was filled with news of turmoil in the Middle East. There was even talk on social media that the Navy commander of the Iranian regime was assassinated. There was also talk of mysterious explosions in multiple locations. And instead of going up, Bitcoin plummeted that weekend. Modern warfare is extremely infrastructure dependent. So the attackers are going to attack the other side's power facilities and networks. If the electricity is out and the network is out, how can you transfer your Bitcoin? How can you trade it? That's when people find out that the most reliable thing is still the dollar that they have in their hands. This means that Bitcoin is not digital gold at this stage. And that's a wrap for this episode. Thank you so much for your support of Front Page. Please remember to leave a comment below the video. This is really helping us to be seen all around the world. The more people who watch Front Page, the more freedom-loving people the world will have. And please hit the like button and hit the notification bell after subscribing. And please share this video with your friends and family because everybody deserves to know the truth.